Andrew, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
So I'm Phil, as you know. I'm a partner at Webisoft. We build custom software in multiple interesting industries. Marketing forced us into this format, and we thought it was a good idea, so we'll indulge them. And so far, so good. My guest today, Andrew. Andrew, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit, what your company does, and let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Andrew Richard. You can say my last name properly.
Richard.
Yeah. I'm the CEO and president, one of the co-founders of a company called Automated Rig Technologies. We're based in Calgary and in Alberta. We've Canada, and we've got an office down in the U.S. as well. And we do work all over the world for the land-based oil and gas industry. So everything from drilling to well servicing. So the full life cycle of the well, and underneath our roof, we have electrical, hydraulic, mechanical, and software engineers, all with tons of industry and field experience. So very, very dialed on the needs and wants and the development of the industry.
Am I wrong in assuming, I've been on your website and so innovation comes up as in the tagline, I believe, or
Yeah.
the hero section. So what does innovation mean to your company?
It means constant improvement, actually. Like in what we see what we see in the industry is a lot of there's refinement. There's small steps in refinement, but we're always looking for the next big step in the industry. So we tend to, unfortunately, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, tend to be on the bleeding edge of
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in different niches and sectors of the industry. And we also look at innovation as a almost like a cross training in within the industry. So what that means in real life is that a lot of us have spent a lot of our time in the drilling niche,
Mm-hmm.
but now we've seen a ton of innovation and development going on in the well completion side. And we're introducing technology that we've been part of deploying in the drilling side maybe 10, 15, even 20 years ago into the well completion side, and advancing that part of the industry with software and design and mechanical and hydraulic designs.
Give me one example of innovation or software that you're really excited about to bring to market.
There's a technology that technology or some code and some mechanical and hydraulic systems that we've put out in the drilling space uh, that's pretty ubiquitous now in the industry. Is It's called an auto driller.
Mm-hmm.
So what that auto driller does is it measures the speed that you're entering the well. So there's three main things that an auto driller does. It is ROP, which is rate of penetration, so the speed that we're running in. It does differential pressure because you're pumping through the center of the pipe, and then the distance off the bottom. There's the differential pressure of the pipe, the mud exiting the bit at the bottom, and you can maintain that. And then weight on bit, so you're measuring how much of the pipe you're putting weight on the bottom of the hole. And so this is a thing that we developed. We've installed 86 of these in the drilling industry, for one particular client, and we've done it in other niches. And now we're seeing this big gap in the well completion space, and we're about to launch an auto driller control system for that space.
Oh, so you're going all in on that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's exciting. As you're in your current role, what takes up most of your day?
Strategy. So so it's really understanding where everyone's going and where the industry is going. And um, our team, our team has kind of been a, a I would say, a best kept secret. We're
Mm-hmm.
really good at engineering, and we're really poor at marketing.
Uh-huh.
And
Often
so,
goes hand in hand. Yeah.
yeah. And so, as I mentioned before, we've hired an external marketing agency, and so we're pretty excited in this rebrand of what we're planning on doing, and really focusing in on the depth of what our team has. So you look at and I know we're shifting a little bit here. This is what's taking up my time these days is thinking about how we externally communicate our value proposition. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look at a lot of websites, you look at a lot of companies, they do a million things, or they look a million times larger than they are.
Mm-hmm.
And the one analogy that I would say about our business is that we're more like an iceberg. Like we've got this, we're showing this much of what we're doing externally, but we're doing way, way more behind the scenes with clients. So I'm trying to figure out how I can float that iceberg above the water there and get that message sent out, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, so do you feel like the top of the iceberg? So is that your way in at the moment where that's the most like obvious service or product that you're going to market with, and then once you're in and you've developed a relationship, then it makes sense to kind of, showcase or highlight those other services you could do?
It is. So we've had 3 lives in our company. Let's say we've been around for 16 years, and
Okay, wow.
the first 5 years of our business, we really lived this. We're the secret behind the scenes with a lot of people, right?
Hmm.
We had this brilliant. I had this brilliant idea of we had this 80. It's that 80-20 rule where 20%
Yeah.
of your clients pay for 80% of your revenue or whatever. So we focused on the 20%, and we really first 5 years of our business, we had 5 clients really, and they were the whales, and it kind of was the reason in their respective niches, and it's why we didn't market,
Yep.
because we would go to that whale and we'd go, hey guys, we're going to do this system. We're going to run this system for you. In fact, one of the initial auto drillers we built on our dime, we installed on our dime. It did so well from a KPI perspective. They bought them on all their systems. And we just looked after those clients really, really closely. And when 2015 happened and and the market crashed, the oil industry crashed, especially here in Canada, we had to reposition ourselves. So we bought a company in Edmonton that ran had a bunch of products, mature products in the industry, and it shifted us from a business where we really competed with nobody, and we were a solutions based business purely, to now we had a bunch of product, and we had 1 or 2 competitors in the space, and it was mature product and whatnot. And as we migrate here with the new technologies that we've got, we're seeing like we're kind of getting back into that mindset of, hey, we truly don't have any competition in these things, right?
Hmm.
So we're slowly migrating back to our actual DNA. Does that make sense? And I know I veered off from what the initial question. So is
No,
that
no, please veer off. Please veer off. Why do you think you have little competition? Is it because it's hard to pull off?
okay? There's 2 ways to look at that question. One is because sometimes the problems, I would say, on custom products that clients have unique problems on,
Hmm.
they don't know who to go to, because or there aren't a lot of companies out there like us that are on time, on budget, on scope, on a brand new custom piece of equipment that nobody even knows what it's going to look like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? So we're really good at doing those things, and we're really good at, like I said earlier, in the hydraulic, electrical, mechanical, and software engineering under one roof.
Yeah.
So it's typical in the industry where you would have a mechanical engineering company, and a fabrication company, and then you might have another hydraulics company, you might have an electrical controls company, and then you have a software guy. So you've got these 4 different companies that have to communicate to the project manager, to the lead in the company, or whoever the client is. And it's a difficult thing to understand all the interoperability things. Like we do a lot of motion control, and you will have a 0% success rate if you tell someone down the road to run some mechanical design, and then this next guy to do the hydraulic, and then have it do electrical over hydraulic control for the motion control. You're going to lose. You need to start with the mechanical. I know I'm getting a little bit geeky here, but you have to start with the mechanical gains of the structure before you build the hydraulic design, and then the hydraulic design has to have a particular differential pressure across the actuators for the control system to work. So
So you need to know what you're doing, essentially.
You need to know, yeah. You need to. Yeah. Sorry. And then the other reason we don't compete is in some very specific niches on some products. So we have a few products that, in air quotes, would compete with incumbent equipment in the field. But the value proposition, I would say our competition is not that equipment, because the value proposition is insane. It's like, one of our products, the operator input is lowered by 97%. It runs 2 times the speed of everything else in the industry, and it has 30% less input horsepower.
So it's like, in a league of its own. It's
totally different. But the competition is actually mentality and change management. It's not, so there is competition, but it's not conventional competition, or it's different objections or different hurdles to get over in the industry.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And through this series we've kind of learned that resistance to change is a common theme. And so you operating in at the bleeding edge, obviously you're kind of playing on hard mode, perhaps. With oil and gas specifically, right? Which is kind of a change resistant industry where, a lot of guests are saying, for instance, really hard to convince stakeholders to move on something if it's unproven, right? If you're the first mover, is going to be very, very, very hard to achieve. Like, you need to see it work somewhere else, preferably in the industry. They need to have their buddies, call them and say, yeah, like, this really worked.
There's a common saying in the oil industry where everyone wants to be first to be second.
Okay, that's a good one.
It's the challenge. We used to do, like I said earlier, the marketing challenge for us as an engineering team is like, it's sort of that field of dreams. Like, if you build it, they'll come. That's just not how it works, right? You've got to communicate where you're going and what your message is going to be and how you can change. What we're seeing is we used to really focus in on safety, and safety is more of a buzzword in the industry. That's one of the sales jargon points.
Funny, because I just had a safety person on like an hour ago.
Well, it's not that it's not the right thing to think about, because it is. But there has to be, what we see is from our clients, is there has to be a monetary gain to it. And what I think we've all landed on is actually our company's core purpose, which is we are relentlessly reducing red zone risk. And we do that by removing personnel from those red zones. And so there's by
automation, you mean, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so there's this huge safety component to it, but that's not where we focus our sales on, or our sales messaging. It's about actually removing personnel from that zone. So, we ran a trial with one of our new technologies earlier this year with a major operator in the Bakken, North Dakota, and with a major oil field service provider. And they ran, normally on a service rig, you're running somewhere between 4 or 5 people. We ran 244 joints of tubing in and out of the well multiple times, with 2 people operating equipment and nobody touching pipe, nobody on the work floor at all, right? So a huge step forward in that space. And if you think about not the first order, like the first order being the oil field service company has 5 guys on site and they pay them, let's say, I don't know, $500 to $1,000 a day, whatever it is, they're paying these individuals. If you go look at the second order and maybe even the third order of like that oil field service company is charging now the oil company a certain amount of money, and all the way up the chain, that person might be $2,000 a day in cost. And if they're $2,000 a day and you're removing one or two of them from the well, it's $7,000 to $14,000 a week that the oil company's saving, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a massive safety component there, because less people, less risk, right? So
yeah, if the robot falls, we don't care as much until they, become sentient, and at that point, they remember that we said that. Yeah.
Yes, there's a whole thing with that Optimus, that Tesla Optimus machine. Like, maybe they'll get to the point
Have
where
you seen a new one? I was looking at one this one. It was a Neo or something, like the one for house course. Have you seen that one?
No, I may have, but I've seen the Boston Dynamics one. That's just terrifying when it stands up.
Yeah. And there's a video like a while ago. I don't know if you saw that one, where like the engineers or the testers from Boston Dynamics were like kicking, pushing the robots and everything. And everyone in the comments on YouTube were like, that sounds like, it looks like a bad idea, guys. This is how it starts.
There's, one of the old fellas that I know, mentors that I've had in the industry years and years ago. I haven't seen him for several years. He used to tell us all the time that eventually there will be a guy and a dog on every location, and the guy is there to feed the dog, and the dog is there to make sure he doesn't touch anything, right? Because the robots will be doing everything. So,
but that's a step. Like that's probably where the industry is headed, right? Like, and probably where it should be headed, like for safety alone, right?
Yeah, like a lot of it's interesting. Where we're focusing just happens to be, I hadn't thought about it until a week ago, but where we're heading with what we're doing is moving to the smaller equipment. So what I mean by that is, you see these big, massive offshore vessels, platforms, and things like that.
Yeah, our client has a couple of those.
Yeah, and those units, those rigs, things move quite slowly. They're all automated. There's very few people to operate that equipment, and there's a lot of reasons. It's stationary. It's not tearing out every single day. There's a lot of reasons why it's a lot more like a factory floor and automation than you get on the mobile equipment. But the smaller the equipment you get, so you go from drill to like land-based triples to doubles to service, like all the way down the chain. The smaller the rigs get, the harder the guys have to work, and the more challenging it is to automate and to remove personnel.
Yeah.
Right? So that smaller part of the industry always baffles me. Yeah, the well servicing side, like that's part of the barrier, I suppose, as well, is that these companies are charging $500 an hour, and they got 4 or 5 guys on site. They've got a rig that costs them $1 million.
So it's hard for them to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that equipment has been refined over the last 70 years. So we're in the process of setting up a new hardware platform for them that removes them from removes them from the red zone. So that's kind of where we're focused over the next certainly the short term.
So there's a bit of a headache of selling the same value to their clients while perhaps like having less men on site, right? So that's probably a blocker for you guys in terms of sales. Like, well, I'm used to selling these 5 guys. I don't know if I can convince the client to pay the same thing for maybe 1 guy and 5 robots, right?
Yeah. Some people, it's also some people, individuals, and that I talk to. I'll be going down to Texas and talking to one of them when I'm there in a couple of weeks. He is somebody that sees the light there. Like he looks at it and goes, for every person that he can take off location or off the rig floor,
That's a
You
win.
save money.
Yeah.
But other portion of this is that when you go to this level of automation and technology and whatnot, it doesn't mean that the person that was there does loses their job necessarily. It means that we need to upskill that individual or that
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
industry, because now we're doing a different level of service. The equipment
Hmm.
still needs to be serviced. It still needs to be looked after. But instead of like tightening a bolt, now we're going to be maybe running code or checking code, or
Yeah.
we're going to be
Yeah.
checking pressures or like different things. Like the industry shifts, right?
Yeah. The displacement, they call it. Same thing with software, right? Like we have, we're a team of about 40 engineers. Um, you know, there's just one developer instead of doing one thing, would maybe move to more of a, so like an example I could give you actually. So my business partner who's acting CTO essentially of the company says he doesn't write code anymore. It just deletes code, right? So a bit of a change of basically you
Yeah.
let AI kind of, do most of it, but then you fix what AI did. It's still faster than coding from scratch. So a bit of a change and shift on how you do things, even for us, like, we don't really have any junior developers in house, right? Like, because that output is easily replaceable. So it's more about like the thinking aspect of it, and the
Mhm.
architecture side of things is where there's more value than actual, like, you know, boots on the ground kind of coding all day. What's an outdated process that you're still stuck with? You operate obviously on the bleeding edge. So what's something that, really grinds your gears? It's like, ugh, it's like this legacy process that's not, you can't replace.
We've made a bit of progress in this space with an M. We implemented a couple years ago an MRP, so that did get rid of our old many spreadsheets. It got rid of many many spreadsheets, but that's a tough question because I finally put my foot down a couple of years ago, and I'm like, this can't stay the way it is. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it
And
drives.
listen, like spreadsheets for sure come back as a, even now, like we're like at the moment we're looking at replacing spreadsheets with basically like, AI models, right?
It's interesting. It's like a lot of document review and
Mm-hmm.
contract review. Like I am the only one in the business right now with Copilot integrated into our tenant, right? Like straight through Microsoft. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be deploying it here soon.
Okay, okay.
You guys
You're
are
the
getting
guinea
it.
pig. You're the first one
Yeah,
to try it. Mm.
yeah. And it's like we did quite a bit of work through this year. We were doing a lot of back end, I'll say, business stuff
Mm-hmm.
that required lawyers and banks and all sorts of fun stuff. And we had documents flying all over the place, and I'm trying to keep up with you know 13 lawyers on this side and three lawyers on this side and
Yeah.
bank lawyers and banks and all of the things I'm talking about are all good things. Like we've had some
Yeah.
incredible awesome things this year, but just keeping up with those things was
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
And so I turned to Copilot and I'm like, create a podcast to this. And for some reason in the summer, it was working every time. I can't make it work now, but it was doing the the male female podcasters, and then they would
Oh, okay. And that's how you got, so you kind of turned it into a not almost like an audiobook.
yeah, exactly. So then I was like, I'm reading these these legal documents from the bank, and I'm like, uh, this doesn't make any sense. And so I'm like,
That's the first time I hear somebody doing this, by the way. That's such a
yeah,
clever idea to get through kind of like a lot of content.
yeah.
You could also have asked it, hey, this is my content. I'm worried about these things. Summarize it for me, or like, hey, should I be worried about this language, or.
Yeah, and I was using it quite a bit in the summer, but I desperately need to get it across the rest of my teams
Yeah.
because that is one of the largest legacy
Mm-hmm.
processes. Like we have two NDAs that we're reviewing right now that were sent from others, right? Not our
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
mutual
Yeah.
non-disclosure agreement. So Now we've got to compare it to ours. We've got to look for any gaps, and that's being done manually right now by the
Oh,
team. So it's
you
slow.
could, pro tip, you could probably use like free chat GPT for this. Yeah,
Probably, yeah, you're
probably.
probably right because it's pretty benign. There's no,
It's pretty surface, yeah.
yeah.
Like even the dumbest version of ChatGPT, which is pretty dumb, honestly,
Mhm.
at this point.
Yeah.
So version 5 is I don't know if you use, obviously you're on Copilot. So OpenAI released GPT-5 a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago.
Yeah.
It, it's pretty apparent that the base version is there to save compute, right? They really kind of, dumbed it down because it's gonna like, and it's very, it will say as a matter of fact, like they're very certain about their answers. They're like, yeah, this is it. And then you start questioning it and you're like, no, this is wrong. And then it will shift to the thinking model, which is, smarter. And it will like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I was totally off with this.
It,
But
it
like for basic like document writing comparison, like you could try it.
yeah, I for sure. I'll talk to the rest of the team. That's a good suggestion because I I have been playing with Copilot, turning GPT-5 on and off, and
Yep.
it's it's very interesting that there's a stark difference in from 4 to 5,
There
right?
is each model has like their own quirks, right? Like Claude would be better at probably coding. Gemini would be good at architecture, I think. Like everyone and everyone has their preference. And now the interesting thing is a lot of them are rate limited. So some of my engineers will have like 4 or 5 models open, and then they'll max out one, then they'll jump to the other one, they'll max it out, they'll jump to the other one. And so yeah, it's getting, it's like when streaming services came out, and now you're
Yeah.
stuck with having like 10 subscriptions to do your work. But it is what it is. Where do you see the most waste in the industry?
I'll flip that around. I think the most waste actually is not capturing the senior leaders in our industry's knowledge and
Okay.
digitizing it
Hmm.
because there's so much there's a tremendous amount of experience uh, that is leaving the industry because of
Yep.
retirement or moving on because of there's that's where you get into the whole what's affecting the oil industry, and there's like there's a lot of underfunding in the industry. There's for example, the Alberta Calgary or University of Calgary for a couple of years even shut down their petroleum engineering department. I think it started back up last year or it was starting back up this year. So there's this reduction in knowledge in our industry.
Mm.
Um, there is a company that I know down. I don't know if you're familiar with. Uh, it they started off as Digital Wildcatters, and they're now called Collide. They're like
No.
they're a group that is working heavily in the AI space, and they're working on agentic workflows for wells and all this other
Okay.
stuff
Super
going on.
interesting. I will check them
Yeah,
out for sure.
yeah, and that is very interesting because what they're doing, they're using their podcast platforms because they've got multiple podcast channels that all feed up into Collide, and then I believe they're using something like Muse.ai that transcribes every single podcast, and then that is feeding into the model,
I see what they're doing. Very
right?
smart. So
And
they're just like we could do with this, actually.
yeah, and they're connecting. They've also connected up, as far as I understand, with the Geology Association and
Hmm.
pulled all of the white papers and all history that are digitized into the model. And they've also pulled in, I believe, the Society of Petroleum Engineers papers as well. So they're building all of this quite like it's very interesting what they're doing. And that's my outside view of what they're doing. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I perceive is going on.
Hmm.
If it makes sense. So that those kinds of spaces are very interesting for bringing that. older generation of experience into the digital world so that that information and experience can get transferred to the next generations. You know,
Yeah,
it's
because young people are not necessarily lining up to join the industry.
no, it's there's a term called the Great Crew Change that the
Mm-hmm.
industry's always talked about, and that's maybe a little bit what's going on right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's like the Y2K sort of like
The
like
bug. Yeah.
emergency that it at least it had a date, whereas the Great Crew Change, I mean, there's a lot of like it's been going on for 10 or 15 years, right? So um,
Yeah, yeah. What keeps you up at night about the next couple of years?
I'm just thinking about Instagram posts, returning shareholder value. Um,
Nice.
but that's going to be my biggest regret. I don't think when I'm 90, I didn't
You
uh,
didn't
provide
create
enough
enough value
shareholder.
for the shareholders. Yeah.
Um, it's a little bit of that. I mean, our team's really, really, really passionate about getting the technology that we've got out to the industry,
Hmm.
and it's about picking the right partners to deploy with and doing that technology enough justice.
Hmm.
You know, our team in here has been involved with something called like this is 25, 30 years ago, well, probably 30, 35 years ago, something called a top drive. It's like a technology and it's a tool that's used on rigs, right? That spins the pipe from up in the mast. Our team was involved with some of the original companies that found like created these things to go out into the industry. We had a company that put a remove guys from racking boards 100 feet in the air that was a robotic arm. Um, and we sold that to Weatherford. We've got people that have deployed wrenches and catwalks and other tools that have automated in the industry. And the tool that one of the biggest tools that we have right now is like is got that kind of monumental shift possibility that those technologies had, and we're pretty excited about getting it out there. And that's what keeps me up at night is like making sure that the application of it is correct,
Hmm.
making sure that the success is there, and whatnot.
Yeah, because you're basically bringing a new product to market. You don't know how the market's going to react, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I know we're coming out on time, so final question for you, and I think I know the answer. It's typically the same answer every time. Uh, what's the real blocker for innovation in your industry? Is it technology, resources, or culture?
It's culture.
Hmm.
Yeah, nobody. No, what's the saying? Nobody got fired for buying IBM or
Yeah.
or Xerox. It's um, it's an interesting thing. There's a sweet spot in the industry. So when things are really, really challenging and people are cutting costs, there's very few companies that are innovating, like
Hmm.
that are leading innovation or paying for innovation. Um, when things are going like crazy, so like the oil prices are, 90+ dollars a barrel, we see the industry doesn't really they'll spend the money, but they also just don't care because they're like, hey, we're printing money again.
Right.
So it's
Let us
um,
enjoy it a little bit.
yeah, yeah. So it's
So there's never a good time for
yeah,
innovation.
it's really for us. What I've realized is it's really about finding the right client at the right part of their life cycle,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? Somebody's dumped $50 million into a bunch of assets. They're very hard to shift to that ship. If somebody's dumped 1 or 2 million in and they're just getting going, and they can see this huge value proposition to differentiate in the market,
Yeah.
that's where they can really shift and make a difference. So
Yeah. Timing is everything in business typically. And yeah, exactly. Like pitching your idea like at the same time that they've maybe experienced like, some kind of blow, like safety as an example, right? They've had like a major incident. You just so happen to have this product that now can, reduce the chances of that happening ever again. Like obviously the timing is perfect versus like if you're trying to sell that like at any other time, it's a harder sell. Andrew, this was great. Really appreciated having you on.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Appreciate reaching out.